Hey everybody, here we are again. It's just one of your dads. It's me. It's the co-host. It's the real host. It's the only host today. But with me, I have an awesome guest. I have Jeff Nelligan. He's an author. He's a father, and he's an Army veteran. So he's putting a check in nearly every box we have, and we are super thankful that he's taken the time to join us. He, from his biography, appears to be an extremely busy man. So with three sons and with the career, thank you so much for taking the time. Give us a little bit about yourself there, Jeff.
Hey, sure, Corey. Hey, listen, first of all, thanks for having me on. And, it's an honor, it's a privilege, and it's a fun and pleasure to talk to a vet. And I have to say, I was enlisted 14 years, Army Reserve and Army Guard, but I have three sons who are all military officers. So the military strain is deep, deep, deep in the family. And I have to say that just having kids like that makes me a better dad, even though they're, in their mid 20s. Just having that satisfaction that they're out there doing something for the nation. And sometimes it's not easy. So I really appreciate the chance to talk with you. It's for me, just Jeff Nelligan, spent a lot of years in politics. I was lucky to grow up with a dad who was a veteran. All my family were veterans from Vietnam, Korea, World War II. My grandfather was in World War I. So it runs pretty much in the family. And I think it's one of the great strengths and a great foundation for the family among both the sons and the daughters. I live in Washington, D.C. and work there. I work for the FDA. And previous to that, I worked on Capitol Hill for many years. I worked in two different administrations as a political appointee. And I've been in a lot of campaigns across the country, presidential, senatorial, House campaigns. And now, just with three sons gone, just revel in, what fatherhood did for me and obviously what it did for them.
Sounds good. It is. It's got to put you on a different level. Being the father of three, I used to joke. I suppose I still do, despite the gap, that if you have more than two kids, that you must have a superpower because you're nearly a superhuman to be able to do that. And not to get too far off the path, but if you had a superpower, and it does, I asked this once, and he was like, "My superpower is patience," and I was like, "That's really thoughtful. You could have said flight." But with that being said, if you had a superpower, what would it be?
If I had a superpower, boy, I'll tell you, more hustle. I think being a dad it's a hustle. You're hustling around, you're hustling for angles, you're hustling kids everywhere they have to be. You're hustling for their opportunities, and you're hustling to be good provider, good father, and also a role model. I think those are that being good at all those three and trying to get better at them all the time. That would be my superpower right there. It's a great question.
Right on, I do appreciate it. I had a previous dad give me the answer that along similar lines, that his superpower was logistics. And
Yes. Oh, that's great.
yeah, it made me think of that when you were talking. So I have been reading your book, Four Lessons from My Three Sons, and you mentioned very early on that you don't pull any punches. You're not worried about being very necessarily PC. You're not out there throwing around curse words or anything like that. But you're you're straightforward, and you get right to it. And I admit that there was a couple times where I read something and I was like, no, 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 I'm done. And then I was like, but I'll read one more page. And then I read one more page and I was like, okay, okay, I'll keep going. I'll keep going.
Oh gosh.
Specifically, like I'm thinking of when they were learning musical instruments,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're like, basically, I don't want to like try to phrase it too specifically, but basically, you were like, they didn't like it, and I kind of like convinced them to quit, and I was like, what? No, 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 and that's no. And I was like, and then I closed the book, and I was like, no, see what he says about it, and then open the book, and it, come to find out, it was because you wanted them to redirect their efforts in something that they actually had a great love for, a passion for, and
Right.
to be honest, like a talent for.
Yeah.
So, that's just one instance in the book where I was like, okay, this guy, he like he really does not care if your feelings get hurt for the most part.
Yeah.
So I just want to off the top, I just want to get that out there, and we will cover it as needed at the end where we get into more self promotion. But of the 4 lessons that your sons taught you, what is the best lesson in your mind?
Oh, the best one. And first of all, I appreciate the candor on you saying that you shut the book, because I sounded like a knucklehead. And I think a lot of people probably read through portions of that and have the same exact reaction. So I appreciate hearing it from somebody rather than someone not telling me. Not, I just do. Uh, Resilience is number one. Resilience is the idea that you get knocked down, you hit an obstacle or a setback, and as a kid, you don't fold like a $3 suitcase. You don't curl up in a ball and start whining. And you don't look for the parent to come enable you and get you over it without any effort on your part. Because I'll tell you, Corey, you know this as well as I do. Every dad listening to this knows this. No one gets a free ride in life. Everyone hits a wall. And adults know it, and kids know it. And once you hit one, there's plenty more ahead. And if you can get yourself up after the first and the second and the 10th and the 20th and the 100th, you're going to be in good shape when the 101st one comes around, because you've done it enough times that you know that you have to drive on. You have to get around the obstacle or over it. You have to think, you have to plan. When I was in infantry school at Fort Benning, old drill sergeant said, assess, adapt, advance. And that's exactly the way kids should approach life, and their parents should be able, their dads and moms should teach them that. And it's the most valuable lesson they're ever going to have.
My one of my drill sergeants, his big slogan was improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So similar
Same.
lines, yeah.
Yeah. I'm older than you. It was a different line back then.
Yeah, it was actually just today that I was researching Army slogans, because I was just get ahead on life in the Army and all that. And it turns out that prior to Be All You Can Be, we were really struggling for good slogans.
Yeah.
That one really like hit the nail right on the head and resonated. But before that, it was not great.
No, that's a great one. Be all you can be. I mean, and that appeals to the kid, female or male, who has a motor in them that they want to get farther in their life. But yes, resilience is definitely the number one trait, and it's so essential, because I will tell you, my kids hit them just like any dad here has kids who hit them, and that confidence that they get by getting over the first one, it just magnifies itself throughout their life.
Well, I'm glad that you touched on that, and maybe it's fate. I'm actually doing a short series of interviews with previous guests on how they themselves achieved or built up mental toughness, quote unquote, and how they then pass that on or plan to pass that on to their kids. Because it's been a rough year for me, and
Really?
I'm at a point where I don't know. Yeah, I won't get into too many details. If you've listened before, you've heard me complain. I had a couple deaths, and now there's some more issues. But we'll gloss over that. Fact remains, it's been a tough year, and I don't know.
Yeah.
If I don't know if I'm mentally tough or if I'm just mentally stubborn. And so I wonder, could you tell us how, if you have time, could you briefly tell us how you yourself gained mental toughness? And I have read a little bit, and I could extrapolate for myself how you've passed that on. But could you also, for the listeners, tell us how you then, taught that to your sons?
Sure. Everyone has these upsets in their life. It can be financial, it can be family, it can be friends. My mom and dad were pretty tough, and that's it's a great question. I'll tell you why, Corey, the way you framed it. because we live in an age where people and kids particularly aren't tough and they don't have that resilience. And I hear about kids who are, you know, 21 years old who are emerging adults and they're finding themselves. And the first job that they get, they need a work-life balance. Well, in the real world, you know, that's just a fantasy. You know, I always go back. My dad, at the age of 15, worked in a vanadium mine a mile below the surface of the Sierra Nevada mountains at 15. At 18, he participated in the invasion of Okinawa. And at 19, he was patrolling the streets of Japan after the armistice was signed. So when people tell me today, you know, about their kids just not feeling right, or, you know, the test was too tough, or they need time to find themselves, I think, my gosh, you know, mental toughness probably came from my family. And of course, I passed it along to my sons, as did their mom. But if you live in an age of enabling, then no one's ever going to develop that mental toughness. If you're that way at 21, by 30 you're doomed, because the world is a really rough place. So I guess that's a good example of, you know, where that mental toughness comes from. Maybe it's both learned, and I think it's probably inherited genetically.
That makes perfect sense to me, because my parents were drug addicts and alcoholics that had zero mental toughness. So that ties into why I would assume that I have none. Now, moving on to the second part of the question, how do you, or did you, impart that on to you've spoken about, you know, not making them feel entitled, and making them essentially stand on their own 2 feet. How can you give you know, a brief synopsis? You don't have to get too specific unless
Sure.
you want to give examples, you know, of what you did to you know, pass that on.
Sure. I think, you know, in the book I talk about it too, but, and, you know, in the military life, it's happening all the time. But in order to build that resilience, you have to build that confidence. So when they were very, very young, I made them do things themselves. The first test came when the eldest was 7 and the youngest was 4, and we were in a big shopping mall, and right in the center of it, an indoor mall. And I gave each kid a $5 bill, and I said, "Go get change. This is not a race. You know, take your time. I'll be right here, but don't come back unless you have change for that $5 bill." And of course, you know, this was a task. This was a responsibility. And so they went off and did it. One kid struck out, and another kid came back with 20 quarters in his pocket. But it was the beginning of giving them that responsibility to go out in a new environment with strangers and perform a task. And of course, the tasks got tougher. I would send them into a kind of a sketchy 7-Eleven with a $20 bill and say, "We need these 5 things. You know, I need Gatorades and Doritos and donuts. When you get them, and come back to the car." And, you know, they had to do it. And they got a kind of a kick out of it. And then we pull up in a bank parking lot, and I said, "Go get Dad $300 from the ATM machine. Here's my password." And then we're in an airport, and I say, "Here's all the materials. Go get us the boarding passes." So you elevated the idea that they had to go out in the real world and perform these tasks, and they're gaining confidence. And, you know, so at age 8, a kid can, you know, put air in the tires of a car because he's done it 3 times, and now he's got to do it again. At age 7, he mows the lawn with, you know, a power mower. You know, today I'd be probably sent to prison for something like that. But at 7, that's what they did. So that's how you build that mental toughness. And it's for you, it's probably both a mixture of toughness and stubbornness, which, you know, kind of sometimes come right together. So with these guys, it definitely was that mental toughness built up over years and years with these tasks.
It that's I appreciate giving those explicit examples. Those were things that I had read about, and I knew that you could touch on those if you wanted, but I didn't want to put words into your mouth. It's
Sure.
really, it really did speak to me. You're reading that because, like you said, they're very simple things, but golly, I cannot put an age to it. But the simple act of going into a store and asking for change, that was something I had trouble with. Oh, God, into my 20s probably, just from social anxiety and not being
Yeah.
like pushed like that.
Yeah.
Um, so and once again, I put that down to my parents, and not to denigrate my father, who he did die this year, but I'm not, I've said it again and again. He was a terrible father. He did me no favors other than when I'm posed with a quarry of what to do. And in my parenting life, I always think of what he would do, and then I do the opposite. And typically
That's nice.
that usually leads me in the right direction.
Yeah. I
But
like it.
along those lines, though, and this is really just a cry into the darkness for you, I would think, because the people that we're talking to here are the least likely people to pay attention to what you're about to say. But I'm interested in your opinion on dads that currently are not like I read your book and you're clearly, it's not, parenting's not easy, but
No.
you had a bit of an advantage based on your mental strength, the things that we've already touched on, your self discipline. What would you say to dads that are lacking in that self discipline needed to control is a bad word, but to guide their kids the right way? Like, how can they improve on that?
Sure. Wow, that's a powerful question. And I've never been asked it. And I've done many dozens and hundreds of interviews like this. Uh, I'm a simple guy. I start with the most basic. I mean, the first thing is, and and again, this is not politically correct. I would urge that father to take whatever device the kid has in his hand and not yank it out of their hands, but say, we're going to put real parameters on how often you can use this. Because a kid using a device, and the average is about 9 hours a day on a cell phone or a iPad, that's the biggest threat I see to fatherhood today is kids passively spending 8 hours, it's 8 hours and 49 minutes, 9 hours almost, passively looking at a screen with something that's doing all the thinking for them. That takes them away not only from their real life and their friends, but also from their parents. So it's setting up that almost that's social media contract, which I write about in another book, which I think is an excellent idea. And so you're divorcing the kid from a great amount of time that he or she is spending on the electronics. And then it's starting with the most simplest things. I used to take each kid on a Saturday to the most peaceful place on the planet, which was the high school bleachers at our local high school at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning with a bag of donuts and say, hey, we're just going to sit here and talk for an hour. And we're going to have these donuts, and your brother's coming up next Saturday, and then your other brother the next Saturday. And this routine is going to last as long as I want it to. And in fact, it still happens. It still happens that I had a kid come back from a tour of duty on an aircraft carrier. They went all the way to India and all the way back to San Diego, 10-month deployment. And when he came back, we went to those same bleachers we went to when he was 5 years old. So the basics, cut the kid's screen time to spend more time with him. At the same time, set up these regularly scheduled moments where you just sit there with no distraction whatsoever, no devices, no people around, and just talk to the kid. And the dad's responsibility is going to be, maybe even write out questions, but just to get the kid talking. So those parents that maybe are not as forceful or brash, and I spent a lifetime in politics, so I've got a pretty good self-confidence. I'm pretty much an egotist. but those parents or dads that are a little bit more shy or a little bit more uncertain, start with those two basic things, you know, a real cut back on the screen time, and at the same time, more engagement and involvement with the kid. Um, and not every kid's going to be an athlete. Not every kid's going to be a great, clarinet player or work in a theater. You know, there's plenty of kids who are good at working on cars, or they're fine, playing the clarinet or doing something like that. But directing a kid towards an interest where he's going to be better and where he's around a lot of kids. That's why I love that example you used about me canon, the trumpet and the trombone playing. When they started doing it, I said, this is leading nowhere. They're sitting in their rooms practicing alone, and they're never going to be great. I already know that. So I'm going to tell them, that was really fun for the 3 months. I'm really proud of you. Put those instruments away. I never want to see them again. But the basic 2 points with a dad that, is kind of uncertain or whatever, those are great 2 places to start.
Those are really good examples, really good suggestions. I would think that even a dad that doesn't have, the self-discipline that you I assume have, those are things that he could still do.
Yeah.
It's not hard for a dad to put limits on social media. It's almost incumbent on a dad to put limits on social media.
I agree.
And the idea of what you do, I can't think of the term for it, but what you did with and still do with your sons, where you would go out every Saturday like that and just spend time with them, not really forcing them to talk, but just communicating with them.
Right.
That's like just I don't know. I'm definitely going to have to do that myself. That's not even something. There's always something that a dad during these interviews will say that just comes across like just the most common thing in the world. But I'm like, man, I never would have thought to do that. Like that makes so much sense. Just once a week, just you got to do this. If it rains, we'll do whatever this instead. But we talk, we find out what's going on. We reconnect. That's just a great thing.
And that's what I said about even having a list of questions. I mean, I literally would have in my mind a list of questions. Who's your favorite kid at school? Who's your favorite teacher? What adult in the neighborhood do you admire the most? And don't say it's me. What's your favorite car? Where do we get the best hamburger when we go out? What movie did you see or book did you read, lately? How's school? Do you really like math? I hated English, but I love physics, that kind of stuff. Once you get the kid talking, they won't stop. That's just the way it is with kids. And it's, I guess the third thing, I would suggest too is make a time every evening where the dad and the kid just walk around the damn block. And maybe if you got a couple kids in the family, you do it with all of them or you do it with one of them. But that one time after dinner, you say, put down the homework, Johnny. We're going to go for 20 minutes and just walk around the block. We're going to go outside the house. And everyone lives in a block, even if it's an apartment or a home or wherever. And you just say, we're going to spend 20 minutes. We're just going to shoot the breeze. So it's on a daily basis at that point. So the kid knows that, hey, it's 7:20 and we're going to be out until 7:40. And the thing is, and we know this from our military days, routine.
I was just going to say that.
Always the routine, so the kid knows there's a certain part of this day that I'm going to be spending with the old man, and that's the way it's going to be. I don't care if it's snowing outside or raining or if it's beautifully sunny in the summer. I've got this routine with the old man, and we're going to do it.
Yeah, the routine is super important. I had a serious lack of that growing up, and I can point out the issues that it's caused. So definitely increasing that and building on that and tying that into more growth and communication with your children, that's a win-win all the way around. So another great one, another really good suggestion. I did want to point this out. It's not necessarily tied into what we've been speaking on, but it's something that really spoke out to me when I read it. and once again, I'm going to paraphrase, but there
Sure.
was at least a point in time where you went to your sons and you were like, here's $5, and I may be off on the number, but basically, here's $5 if you can come back with something positive that you've seen in the world. Where and I might be conflating this with something else, but essentially, you were like training them to go out and find like a funny joke
Right.
or something that was just uplifting, as opposed to going out and focusing on the negatives, and that really
Right.
did speak to me.
It became, and we still, and some of the gags that they yanked out of places we went or where we were, some of the gags we're still using. Um, I made a point of saying that, a kid once came back. He was 5 years old at the time, and I'd sent him into the market and I said, we need salami, and go to the butcher counter, the meats counter, and get me a half a pound of salami. And, now most kids at 5, I mean, most parents are not going to do that. I did. I'm not afraid of the world. The minute you're afraid of the world, you're crazy. So he came back and he had this funny story about some lady cutting him off in line and then getting in an argument with the butcher. And so he comes back to the checkout counter at our Safeway, and I said, "What took you so long, brother?" And he goes, "They had the funniest thing happen." And he told the story, and he told it almost verbatim, mimicking the butcher and the old lady and everything. And I said, "Man, that's great." And I just turned to the other two guys and I said, "Look, that that's a slice of life. That's beautiful." I said, "I'll give you $1 every time you come back to me with a funny story for me and your brothers, you know?" And so they were constantly looking for these damn funny stories. And, a guy sees one of my sons saw this woman back into this guy's car in a parking lot at a youth football game that one of my other kids was in, and put a massive dent in it. And the guy walks up, whose car got hit, walks up right on it and looks at it and looks at her, and there's debris on the ground. And the lady says that dent was always there, And so, he comes back and tells me, pay the man, baby. There's $1. And so there was always these funny little things that would happen, and they'd come back, and it wasn't a home run every time, but they were always looking for a gag, and it just made them kind of upbeat, positive kids. Just always, hey man, there's an angle here. I can get to the old man, and my brothers will like it too. So yeah, it was again building that positive kid rather than that kid who's his face is buried in a damn cell phone and can barely mumble a hello to another adult or a kid.
Yeah, that really did speak to me as something that another thing that I want to pick up when my son's old enough, and that hopefully someone listening to this, that spoke to them too, because I really do feel like there's so many things that I read about your book where I was like, fuck, like why didn't my
Yeah.
parents do anything like that with me? I mean, like if I had not had a grandmother and a grandmother and her ex-husband, not even her husband, but her ex-husband. If I hadn't had them, I basically wouldn't have had parents at all. And I signed up for the army at 17, and
Whoa.
actually I signed up at 16, and I went to basic training at 17. I turned 18 waiting for it to start. I just could not wait to get away. I knew that was, I was just going down further and further if I stayed there. I barely even graduated high school. I'm still in high school when I signed up, but I just knew that there was nothing for me, and that I wanted to do everything I could to be as far from that as I could.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just like, I'm so jealous of your sons because you are. I'm not gonna call you, like the epitome of dad. I'm not gonna put that on you as that kind of stress. But you are a really good dad. Still are, from what little I've heard and spoke to you, and it really
I'll
does
tell
make
you,
me.
I will tell you, Corey, I appreciate that so much, but I'll tell you, their mom, my ex, deserves 90% of the credit. I get 10% because I was a nag, but I had a strategy from the day, and maybe this is what dads should do too, that are maybe not as, brash as me. I had a strategy from when they were very, very young, that this is the kind of person I wanted them to be. And, kind of dovetails into the men they are today in terms of being in the service, you know, I wanted them steadfast and cheerful and tough and rugged and alert, all these things. And it's funny that they all three end up where they are. But, I give a lot of credit to her, but it's also the idea that every kid, I don't care, every dad listening, your kid has, is good at really is good at one thing. They're maybe just average at other things, but there's one thing that they're really good at, and it's your responsibility as a dad to find out what that one thing is. And on the way to finding it, it's easy to make them an upbeat, positive person. It just is. And I'll tell you something else too, Corey. Every time when I was wrong, I admitted it. When there was some heavy duty stuff with my job, when I got fired from 2 jobs because I was on a campaign and we lost, I was up front. Dad, the old man lost his job. He's going to be fine. Don't worry. Or passing all these office buildings around the DC area, all these faceless monsters, with steel and glass, and that's where I work now. After I was in politics, we drive by them and I'd say, guys, these buildings are full of men who have a picture of their family on the wall and a coffee mug like you made me in 2nd grade and a computer screen in front of them. And they're all thinking, what the hell am I doing here? I was going to be somebody. And here I am as an office drone. And I said, you don't want to be that guy because that's your dad. And you've got to get farther than your dad did. And so when you're that honest with them, they're going to listen to everything else.
Honesty is huge. I just uploaded a reel the other day of a dad saying that some of his most important advice was, if you ever mess up, to apologize, because it shows them that that's what adults do, is apologize when they make mistakes.
Right.
Tied into that, I want to get into the Army a little bit, but real quickly tied into that, one of my co-hosts does typically ask, and he has a really roundabout way of saying it, but what is your best advice for dads? You give all kinds of advice. You've given all kinds of advice, and maybe your best advice is something you said before, but just to make it explicit, just to get it out there, and maybe to post it in a reel, what would you say is your best dad advice for, we'll say, a new father?
We kind of touched on it earlier when you asked me another question. You have to have a strategy for your kid. When you hold that kid in your arms and he or she is 2 hours old, that's when you start thinking, what do I want this kid to be? And then you have plenty of time to think out that strategy. And the strategy is, I want him to be with good character and good conduct and courteous and alert and positive and strong, and that's the piece of advice. And it comes down to, literally, Corey, you've got a dad and they've got a kid, and let's say he's 2 years old, or let's say he's 4 years old. And he sits down with a pad of paper and a pencil and he says, okay, what's this kid going to be doing at age 5? What's this kid going to be doing at age 6, 7? What things am I going to push him into that I think that he's built for, even at the age of 4, that I think he can be really good at or really like? If you have a strategy, you can build the kid you want. And that parents don't do that. They let the culture raise their kid. They let the screen, they let people at their school, their peers. No, 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 no. You raise the kid the way you want to. And if the parent has a strategy, the dad has a strategy, that's the first step. It's the only step.
And just an addendum on that, you mentioned the age of 4. Do you think that's a good age to kind of start in on this, or did you just pick that one at random?
I picked that one at random, but maybe there was an ulterior motive in it, because at age 4, I got them involved in sports. First, they played soccer, because every kid plays soccer. It's really easy. And you're around other kids, you're around other parents, you're on a team, you have that camaraderie. Soccer will take you places, but then the next thing we did was lacrosse. Now, lacrosse is a pretty tough sport to learn for a kid. Picking up a ball, the hand hand-eye coordination, the endurance to run. You take some hits in lacrosse, but I pushed him towards the sports angle, basketball, obviously in the driveway, because what sports does is, it's exactly like the military almost. You have to practice, that is, exercise personal discipline to get better. And dad can be there every minute of the day practicing with you when you need to. You have the camaraderie of a team. All these guys around you, even if they're 4 or 5 years old, who all want to win. And so there's that goal. And the third thing is there's a ton of adversity, because when the clock is 0-0, someone's won and someone's lost. It's great. It's a great teaching thing. If you lose the game, you better feel bad and you want to win the next one. So those three qualities, which is just much like the service, I did it early, but not every kid's going to be an athlete, but any kid at 4 can start in athletics, and most kids can get, relatively good. If athletics isn't, then you say, okay, is this kid going to be a musician? Is this kid like cars? Is this kid good, working in a theater? Does he like robotics? And you're the dad. It's easy for you to find out. You're there all the time with him. You know what he's good at, And so when I said 4, I just kind of maybe thought back in my own mind to when I first put him in sports, and they played a range of sports, and, they got better and better. And it helps to have 3 boys because they were so competitive with one another. I have a kid, my youngest kid plays professional rugby in the United States for the DC team. And he's been with the US team in Uruguay and Holland and Chile and all this. But the reason he got good at rugby was because he was banged around a lot playing football with his older brothers. And he just became very, very tough. And that toughness just kept through his entire, childhood, teens, adolescence, all the way through college. And at West Point, he walked on the rugby team. He'd never played the game before. As a freshman, his senior year, he's a first-team All-American. He had that drive and that discipline and that adversity and that camaraderie to get better and better at the sport. Now, not everyone is going to be like that, My other 2 sons were good enough, but not that good. But I use 4 because I think that's when you really start getting involved with kids, outdoors in a major way.
Yeah, that does make sense. I was just recently trying to think of when I wanted to get my son started in, more physical activities. I've read and been told that it's almost necessary to get them in something physical to, kind of work out that energy that kids naturally have. We will, gosh, I don't want to take too much time before we shift to promoting everything you've got going on, but I did want to get into one thing at least about the Army, because you did mention the service there very briefly, and I just wanted to know how you think I don't know how to phrase it best, but so I'll probably do it the wrong way. But well, first and foremost, when you were in the Army, had you had your children yet?
Yes. By the time I got out of the service, I was 88 to 2002. I had all 3 kids at that point. Yeah.
Okay, so it does follow that this will apply to you. How would you say that the Army most shaped you as a father? What did you gain from it that you did not have prior to going in, or that was a weakness of yours?
I think as much as I thought I was disciplined, I think the Army gave me more discipline. What it did is it made me more conscious of the team effort, because I was in a platoon of guys and a company of guys and a battalion of guys and women. And what it did was it just made me, even at that age, it made me think more and more of the team kind of approach to things. And I was kind of an individual all the time, and, kind of selfish. I'll say it. I was selfish. And being in those kind of groups made me think, wait a minute, it's not about you, man. All these people, they're just as good at you as you at these things that we're doing. And I was in a MI battalion too. And I thought that really, it had a profound effect, and it helped in being with the kids, because I always emphasized with them, you're on this team, you got to root for everybody. Even if your fanny's sitting on the bench game after game and you're not getting any playing time, you got to root for every guy on that field, including the guy who's taking your place. It's just going to make you a better person. And they got it. They became the team guys. And that's one of the reasons that they're probably in the service now, because they were around that certain cut of person, which the service always brings together, who have that personal discipline, who can get through adversity, who, loves being part of a team doing something. And so I think that rubbed off on them, definitely.
Right on. It made me think, even if you're on the bench, you still got to do your part to get the
Yeah.
ball to Louis.
Yeah, man, get the ball to Louis. Exactly. That's one of the phrases.
Yeah. You can still do your part.
Right. Your self-awareness. I am sitting on the bench. What I've got to be aware. What do I need to be doing? I need to be rooting for everybody else. Even if the guy that's, taking my position is doing really well and is going to be taking that position for the rest of the season. You got to be for that guy. It just makes you a better human being.
Yeah, better human, better teammate, better everything.
Yeah.
So before we shift in here to the last part of the episode, I did want to come with kind of a sillier question. And
sure.
I've heard this asked a couple ways, but never the way I'm about to ask it. So I'm not saying I'm the first, but at least it's interesting. So typically people ask, if there was a movie about your life, who would betray you? But what I want to know is, if there's a movie made about your life, who would you be in that movie? And you can't be yourself.
Oh, easy. I'd be one of my sons.
Okay. That's kind of cool.
I'd want to be one of my sons, because I would have wanted to see what their reaction is to the old man. I mean, they're old enough now that we can joke about how they were raised. And, before I published that book, and the first edition was on National Public Radio, so it went crazy. And part of the reason it went crazy is because of sections just like the ones you close the pages on. Hard stuff. There's no equivocation in that book. I mean, and if dads read it, they're going to go, wait a minute. So particularly that last chapter, this is rough, but I'm not engaged in morality plays with my sons, or nuances, or being politically correct, or worrying about what other people saying. These are my sons, and I'm going to do what I need to do with them. And so I would love to see the perspective of my son, being a son, with dad sitting there saying all these wacky things and doing all these crazy things, to see what I would feel like.
Right.
I don't know if that's a good. I have to say, these questions you've asked, most of them I've never been asked before, so this is great.
Well, I actually do spend a little bit of time trying to come up with interesting things to say. I used to really be very blasé, very plain, ask questions about the geography of your location, things that were interesting to me, but that weren't going to make good listening for a podcast. One more thing. Your sons are, maybe it's just the way you portray them, but they all three come across as very intelligent men. Do you think that, I mean, this might not be politically correct, but if you think that they weren't as intelligent growing up, that your tactics would have still applied and worked as well as they did, or do you think that you might have had to adapt or modify a little bit?
No question. If they'd been less intelligent, I wouldn't have modified a thing. And see, here we go to another, unpolitically correct thing. I tell you, Corey, I hear from so many people, so many parents, sincere and earnest, good dads and moms. My kid is so smart. And, I live in Washington, D.C., okay? There's a lot of smart people here, Okay. And I worked on the Hill where there's a lot of smart people. And smart is overrated. I will tell you that. When people tell me their kids are smart, and I hear it from so many, and I know why they're saying this, they're proud. But, they're talking about kids who can't turn a light on in a room. They're talking about kids who can't follow through on anything. They don't have the personal self-discipline to actually complete something. I don't care how smart a kid is. I want to see him complete the task, whatever's in front of him, even if it's a C effort. Okay. Smart in this world doesn't, this is a very smart country. This isn't somewhere else where I could name 100 countries. The biggest thing with a kid is not how smart they are, but they follow through something all the way to the end. And that's what we lose. That's the most important thing in a kid. So yeah, I don't, however smart my guys are, there are plenty of kids smarter than my kids. I will tell you that. They went to schools where there were some pretty high-end kids and everything else. My kids got through school fine. 2 of them went to academies. And, but I just want to see that kid who can just follow through right to the end. That's the kid I want.
For sure. Yeah. I always get it wrong, so I'm not going to try to quote it, but it's like Rocky said, life's going to knock you down and it's going to keep you there if it can. And the person that's able to get up and keep going, you may be a genius, but if you can't get up off the ground and keep marching, then you're just not going to succeed.
Right. So, exactly.
It's really the ones that are able to finish that are the ones that are going to get ahead in life.
Yeah. And I tell you, my kids have been around kids much smarter than them. And, they haven't amounted to much. And
yeah. There's a million smart drug addicts.
Yeah. Right. And at a certain point, if, there's a certain point in age, and I see it all the time where I live. If you haven't done, if you haven't completed something by a certain time, you're doomed, because you're going to, that habit is going to dog you for the rest of your life, and see, that's the thing about the service too. You have to follow through. Otherwise that E5 is on your ass and there's no alternative. You finish the job. So again, the whole intelligence thing, I'm always, suspect about. I just like the kid who can just get it done,
That's cool. More really, really deep wisdom, which I did not expect that to head into. So I do appreciate that. Something more for the listeners. But that does bring us here to the second part, for the most part, the last half of last quarter of the podcast. And that is where I give the listener the time to promote whatever it is you might have going on. I know that we've done a little bit of talking about your book, but it may be that there's some more angles to that you want to talk about. Might have something else you got going on that you want to promote. So just go ahead and take this time to share that with our listeners and get whatever that you might have out there.
Sure. The book that Corey's talking about is the second edition of 4 Lessons from My 3 Sons. It came out last fall, and it's on Amazon. It's called 4 Lessons from My 3 Sons, How You Can Raise a Resilient Kid. And my website has all these articles, about much of which Corey and I have talked about here, www.nelliganbooks.com. It also contains a book called that I wrote a year ago called Your Kids Rebound from Pandemic Lockdowns, a parent guide to restoring their families. The COVID pandemic was handled in every which way that was wrong and not one way that was right. And the most damaging part of it was the keeping kids out of school and in lockdown, where they got some bad habits going. First of which was just total addiction to social media. The rise in the usage of it on a daily basis was accelerating. By 2020, it just went through the roof. The second part is it destroyed a lot of kids' confidences. That's why you've got, so many kids, at least, 48% of all kids under the 18 have had a major depressive episode in the last year. The third part is just the physical nature of kids. 22% of kids under the age of 18 are either overweight or obese. That's 1/5 of all kids under 18 are overweight or obese. That's ridiculous. I mean, come on, this country can do better than that. So that book describes how those damaging effects can be reversed. And much of the advice in there, parenting advice, is similar to what's in 4 Lessons from My 3 Sons. As well, the pandemic book, Rebound, has 240 sites to medical, psychological, and health literature about how you can help turn your kid around from that dismal 2.5 years. Other than that, I have an Instagram account, Nelligan_books. I have a Twitter account @ResilientSons. And of course, my Facebook page is Jeff Nelligan Books. And I'm on LinkedIn. It's just Jeff Nelligan. And I have to say, the questions Corey has asked have been really, half of them I say I haven't even answered before, and I've done these things numerous times. But it goes back to almost his first question. What do you say to a dad in raising a kid? A strategy, sitting down, writing it down, watching your kid, knowing your kid really well. I'm of the mind, again, we're going to be unpolitically correct here. Your job as a dad is not to make your kid like you. Your job as a dad is to prepare your kid for the real world out there, right outside your front door every day. So in preparing your kid for that world, that's where the strategy comes in. And if you've got that strategy, you're way ahead of the game already.
I'm actually really glad you mentioned the part about, being their friend, because I was going to bring that up myself, but I didn't want to take too much more time. Just briefly before we end here, this is just a personal curiosity of my own. I'm an English major, and I don't ever write with the intent of publishing, but I write for fun. And I was just curious, as an author yourself, if you were going to write in a genre, fiction, we'll say, what would you most likely write in? Would it be fantasy? Would you write detective novels? Where would you be most likely to, place your interests?
In history, maybe write historical fiction. Again, I told you I come from a long line in the military, and my sons continue it. And I think the profession of arms, soldiers and sailors, airmen, Marines, there are countless stories to be told about them, both male and female, that are inspiring and full of joy, full of heartache for sure, but that just show, what a human being can accomplish and put up with and, drive through. And I think if I was going to do something like that, I don't think I'd be very good at it. That's what I'd like to write about, because I remain enamored of any veteran. I met one of my bosses today, a deputy commissioner at FDA. I was talking to her, and I had a ring on. It's a West Point national championship ring, and it has the West Point crest on it. She pointed to it. We were at this big function, a holiday party. And she says, "Oh, were you in the Army?" And I said, "Yeah, I was just a reservist, and but one of my sons is a Army officer, went to West Point. That's where this ring's from." And she says, "Oh," I said, and she said, "Oh, my husband was in the service." And now this woman is a presidential appointee. She is a big deal in DC. And she just came up to me in the midst of all this stuff to ask about the ring. Her husband, I said, "Well, your husband was in the service." I said, "Tell me." And she says, "Yeah, he was, we were stationed in Fort Campbell." And I said, "101st?" And she goes, "Yes." And she says he was an E5, 2 tours of Iraq. And I'm just thinking, I said to her, what your husband accomplished is bigger than what you'll ever accomplish in this whole town. And I said, I respect the hell out of you, but you are married to a man who did 2 tours of Iraq with the 101st Airborne Division. I said, do you realize what privilege you have every night when you go home and see him? And she understood, but no one listening to us even got it, you know. But I did, and she was just thrilled because here was finally someone who could look at her husband and just say, this man, this is a stud. This is a guy who's seen more in his life than all the years of everyone in that room put together combined. So that's why I go back to when you asked the question about what I would write, I'd write about guys like that and guys like you, all these enlisted guys out there who really, do something every day that people in the civilian world can't even comprehend.
Some of them can't even comprehend going to work every day.
Yeah, there you go.
Before I forget, though, if you do enjoy reading historical fiction, there's a military series, and the name of the author escapes me, but it's based in the Napoleonic Wars. It's about an English soldier that works his way up the ranks. It's his last name is Sharp. It's the series is called the Sharp books. It's like Sharp's Regiment, Sharp's Rifle, Sharp's this and that and the other. They're all very good. But it kind of falls in line with some of the things that you were mentioning. So if you're interested, that's something you could look into.
Sure.
Before we go here, typically one of my other co-hosts will give a dad joke, and I'm not really looking to tell a dad joke to send us home on, but I do have a reasonably funny joke that I'd like to share. I do like to always, we didn't really get too negative or too dark this time around. We kept things pretty upbeat, but from time to time, we do dip our toes into some darkness sometimes. So, when that happens, we like to keep the habit or the routine of our jokes at the end. So this one's actually got a title, and it's called Holy Cow. So a pair of cows were talking in the field. One says, "Have you heard about the mad cow disease that's going around?" "Yes," the other cow says. "Makes me glad I'm a penguin." And
that's pretty funny. I mean,
I thought it was too, to be honest. I chuckled, so I was like, I'll just share that.
Transcends dad joke. I mean, I think that's actually funny. Good laugh.
It's got a foot in both realms there.
Yeah.
So hopefully somebody gets a chuckle out of that. But with that being said, Mr. Nelligan, I do appreciate you, sir. You've shared so much of your life, so much of your wisdom. You've continued the trend of teaching me and hopefully making me a better dad after each and every interview.
How old are your kids?
He just turned 2 in July. So this is his first real Christmas where he understands even what's going on.
Hey, man, there's that strategy right there.
I'm not going to lie. Like when you were like set down with pen and paper, I was like, why not? Like I've actually thought about that and put it off because I simply did not know. But when you were listing, very basic but necessary qualities like being strong, being honest, like those are things that are just, a no-brainer. So if nothing else, I could start a list with things like that.
And, one thing my kids did, in fact, I told you at the beginning, I was talking to my middle kid who just got back from Pearl, was deployed out all the way to the international date line and back, and Guam. Came back to Cincy. He's a recruiter there. But we were talking on the phone. He's an avid reader. And he was an avid reader because, and this is something you can take for a 2-year-old. We had no screens in our house. We didn't even have a TV. So these kids never got, DVDs, they never saw cartoons. They had books, and we bought them hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books. And we started with a series called The Magic Treehouse, and then the Berenstein Bears. But from the earliest ages, I just read to them because we never had a screen to turn on. And at 2, we would read to them. We would just show them the 2-year-old books. And there are such things, believe it or not. They're just big. Yeah. And we would just go through them again and again and again. And then we buy another dozen and we'd go through those. And then we'd had 2 kids sitting on our laps and a little baby. And then finally, at one point, at 5, the eldest is 5, we have 3 kids sitting in our laps and we're just looking at books, and we just keep buying books, and they became avid readers, and they still are. Now, again, they didn't have any screens. They didn't get a cell phone until they were in 11th grade. at the end of 11th grade. But just the magic of those books made them sharper and more alert, made, it wasn't passive. They really had to think so maybe I should add that as an addendum to dads who have these young kids like you, that you don't even there's no screens. The kid never knows a screen. All he knows is books. And that kid will get real sharp real fast.
That's actually really interesting. Yeah, I read to my son. We actually joined this. Shout out to Dolly Parton. She's got this program where she sends a children's book to you one a month.
Great.
I don't know what the age is, but it's obviously for young readers because it's very basic. So we read him those. We get another book every time we go to Target. We already see, and I have zero to before I forget, this does kind of tie in a little bit. Did you plan for 3, or was that just something that happened?
1 and 3. We had the first one, and immediately afterward had the second one, because it was our belief that they needed companionship. And obviously the providence of God Almighty, that they were both boys, and really tight, 14 months apart. And then the third one came along after we tried more and more. Third one came along, and he was 3 years younger than the eldest. So it was perfect. We had this little trio, and, the companionship thing was always there with them. And thus, if the eldest one read, they all read. If the elder one was out there with a lacrosse stick, they were all out there. Or they were in the driveway trying to shoot baskets on a 10-foot hoop, which didn't work at that age. But they were always together, and that companionship and that tightness lasts to today. That's the tightest bunch of kids I've ever, obviously my sons, and maybe I'm biased, but they're tight.
I had more than one dad tell me that I need to have, and it looks like we're going to, that Good. I need to have at least 2, because first and foremost, we need good people having kids. But on top of that, like you said, they will have the longest relationship, presumably, of their lives with their siblings. You and your wife, one day, unfortunately, you will pass, and they will then still have each other to fall back and rely on, and that's a huge thing.
I'm glad that dad said that, because I didn't want to be the one to say it first. I really fear for kids who are only children, because all they have is a screen, and mom and dad, are busy or whatever, but that kid doesn't have anyone around as a companion. And so I always tell, and again, I'm unfiltered, and that already. You read the freaking book, baby. But I will tell people, even at work or when I see around, they'll show me a young baby, and I say, when's the next? And they go, oh, it's so much, I'm crazy busy. I don't sleep. I never sleep, and it's like, well, what the hell, man? I had 3. Okay. And while we were doing it, my wife was head of a private school, and I was a press secretary on Capitol Hill for a senator. So don't tell me you're so damn busy that you can't have another. Okay. And of course, Corey, it goes over real well sometimes, right? They
loved hearing that.
They just turn right away. But I'm saying it to you because I feel like I can say it. That other dad was exactly right. Have that kid as soon as you can, because then that 2-year-old and that whatever it is, 3-month-old will be friends and companions and push each other for life. And if you're bonus round, baby, bonus round, have 3.
And then I get a superpower.
There you go. Yeah. So I like that.
I'll have that to look forward to. All right, then. Well, I guess that'll do us for today. I do appreciate you taking this. I look at the clock and I see that you've taken extra time with us. So thanks so much for that.
I've loved every minute of it, bud.
Yeah, me as well. I never know what to expect with guests that are essentially strangers, but I've been super lucky finding, really giving, really friendly dads, and you've once again continued that trend. So thanks so much for that.
You got it. And
good luck up there. In that that dangerous, swampy area.
Yeah, babe.
I pity you sometimes. Oh, I did have this question on my mind before you go. As
Sure,
far
man.
as networking, talking, that's your job essentially. Was that
Yeah.
something you were good at before? Did you get significantly better at it? Were you just always just a friendly guy? I'm very introverted, so I just have an interest in like how that
Yeah.
came about.
I mean, the reason I became this way is because my mom was in politics. And early on, she just pushed me in front of adults all the time. And you had to, like my kids, go get my $5 change there, buddy. I was constantly pushed in front of adults and kids, and you just get a knack for it. I knew in this world that if you have that confidence and you have that kind of ease, it gets easier and easier. I mean, people don't grow up just going, "Oh, I'm in love with the world and I can talk to anybody." It's what I tried to do with my kids. Like I said, with those examples, was make them comfortable and confident anywhere they were. Look for the joke always, you know. Don't be afraid to, talk to a stranger if you're really in freaking dire need. Uh, so it just developed over the years, and also I've had, I mean, yeah, everyone has ups and downs in life. I've had more than my share, but man, it's a pretty good life, and I think that's another thing about being a dad. Your dad should know this. The more comfortable and at ease and you know good natured your kid is, the better you are, because you see that and you go, hey man, things are pretty good, you know. And
I'm doing a
so,
good job.
right, I'm doing a good job, and I see this kid, that makes me satisfied, So I think it's just part of it, the personality thing. It's easier to get along in life this way.
Cool. Right on. Good to hear. And it's something else that I will definitely keep and probably take with me when I go. So before we get into something else, you're like super easy to talk to, and it's incredibly easy to go off on another tangent. So we'll just go ahead and say, thanks one more time. I hope you have a wonderful evening and a Merry Christmas. And from your two dads and Jeff Nelligan, we'll check you later. And that's it for the podcast. This is probably just extra nothing that I'll delete at the end of the editing process. But once again, thanks so much for coming on. You were
Hey man,
awesome.
it
You
was a
were
blast, man. I mean, I love these questions. You say you're not used to doing it on your own. Hell, you got me stumped a few times, and like I say, I've been doing this a long freaking time. I've had many years, to think these questions out. And when I get a new one, it's like, whoa, man, let me think here.
well. I'm not. I never want to be a gotcha person. I mean, any controversy that comes is unintentional. I released a clip the other day from I interviewed a Secret Service agent, ex Secret Service agent, that had the temerity to say that Hillary Clinton could have done better in like controlling the image that she put out, and that her and Bill one day did look like they were actually in love. And that went viral on Instagram. It got over like 12,000 views, and it was just
Oh
all
my
people.
gosh.
Yeah, it was all people calling him a liar, and even the ones that weren't calling him a liar were like, "Why are you saying this? What's your motive to this?" And so that was completely unintentional, and I never go into these trying to do that.
But that's not a
So
gotcha question. I mean, that's a question you asked. He answered it honestly. Good for
yeah,
him. I mean, if I saw that viral, I would say, well, here's a guy that was right there. He was Secret Service. He was around him all the time. He should know, you
yeah,
know?
actually, I unintentionally, like, I realized halfway in that I was unintentionally kind of leading him, because I started off with people in Washington, you always assume they're liars or bitches. But and then I stopped myself from mentioning her by name, but it just so happened that he had been on a protection detail with her.
Right.
And so
So he knows,
yeah,
you
so
know?
he naturally said that. But
I think that's good. I think that's good that you got him to answer it honestly, and it wasn't even a gotcha.
yeah, that
Because
was
people in DC are bitches and they are liars. I mean, I'm telling you, I've worked here for 30 years, man. it's tough, you know?
Yeah, I figured that it had to be at least a form of what I was saying. And I was interested to say or to hear what he would say because he was very particular about what he could and couldn't talk about.
Sure.
But overall, he's a really good guy. So I was glad to have him on. And that's just really my extremely long way of saying that I try to spend time, developing questions and lines of conversation that are interesting and that are thought provoking without
Yeah.
being, gotcha like that.
Well,
Because I
also
just don't want
too, I
to.
mean, you know, if you're talking about dads, there's no such thing as a gotcha question. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're talking about dads and how they should be and what people think about their role as a dad or a parent, there's nothing gotcha about that. They're going to tell you what the truth is, you know. I mean,
Yeah, the only thing gotcha about it is that I'm completely honest and that my guests
right.
presumably are too.
Well, that's the thing. You know, Mark Twain once said, if you never tell a lie, you don't have to remember anything, you know?
Yeah.
So why wouldn't anyone not be honest? And that's, in fact, my honesty in that book, drove a shitload of people crazy. When I
Yeah, I bet
said,
you got some
oh,
pretty mean people talking to you.
holy shit, did you come to the part where I'm talking about the guy says, my son said, oh, I want to be a teacher?
I don't think I've got to that part yet.
Okay, it's at the end. My son told me in 10th grade, I think I want to be a teacher, Dad. And I said, And I'm thinking, okay, you want to be a teacher? About a week later, we're all four in the car, and I take him to one of the unsavory, neighborhoods in the county and drive up and down the streets. And there's cars on blocks and there's guys hanging out smoking and drinking beers and the houses are all fucked up. And I said, you want to be a teacher? This is where you'll be lucky to live on a teacher's salary. And they were, all three kids were freaking shocked. And I said, no, I'm not making this up. You won't make enough. You're used to our big house and our acre of land and all your neighbors whose dads and moms work and your private school and all the athletic gear you need and anything you want. And I said, you will never have that. And I said, look, and their mom was a teacher. My dad and mom were teachers. My brother's a teacher. So I said, there's no one I respect more in this world than teachers because they shaped me for what I am today. I said, but you'll make nothing. You'll make no money and you will live a lifestyle that is about 1/4 of what you're used to right now at the age of, 16.
Yeah,
And I said, that's just the facts, man. And of course, I ended it up. I took him to our closest friend who has a house on the Chesapeake Bay, for a barbecue. And I said, this is what you're used to, not that. And I took holy hell from it. I mean, I got just torn apart. And I said, and to my detractors, whenever I get a note or a phone call, I say, look, I could have said the kid wanted to be a zoologist or an archaeologist, but he said teacher. Okay. And so I wasn't going to lie to you people about what he had said, just so I could make it look nicer. And teacher never came up again.
that's like
Because,
multiple truths hitting at the same time
oh,
because
it was awful. Yeah.
you're like, you didn't tell them that we don't need teachers. You didn't tell them they wouldn't make a great one. You just
No,
told them that, like, right now in America, that's not the
right.
lifestyle you want to live.
Right. And like I said, the whole family is full of teachers. Their mom was head of a school, employed, 110 teachers. But I said, you're never going to make anything. And you know the life you're used to and that you like and that you respect. And I said, you'll make $65,000 a year, and you'll be lucky to rent one of these shacks. It was awful. It was awful. And of course, they were scared out of their minds, man, because I didn't just go through one street. I drove around for half an hour and we had the windows up and they were whispering and people were looking at us, in our big old
That's another
SUV.
that's another lesson because you're like, you expose them to like, there's out, like, this is life out here. And,
Right.
this is
Right.
not just in the news.
Right. I told them they've known this phrase that I'm about to tell you since they were 5 years old. Choices have consequences. and you make the right choice and a good consequence arrives. You make a bad choice, and you live here. I know it sounds awful, but it was the truth. And I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. They're my kids,
Well,
So
this ain't
yeah,
going on the podcast.
when you get to that part, you're going to love it. You're going to go, man, that guy's a jerk.
I mean, like if I hadn't talked to you first, that probably would have been another point where I was like, damn, am I gonna have to close this book again?
Yeah, man.
But like at the same time, like it's almost like a Sherlock Holmes novel where like I see the picture and I'm like, okay, I get nothing from that. And then you tell me, your reasoning behind it. And I was like, holy shit, of course. Like I totally see that now. Like I was bordering on anger when in reality I just wasn't putting two and two together.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
you have a really well, a professorial way of teaching.
you'll read another story at the end too, real quick, where we go into this private school. We have a lacrosse tournament, and we're early, 5 minutes early, right? If you're 5 minutes early, you're late, baby.
Yeah.
And all these banners are up there saying diversity and inclusion and justice, and
Oh, and
social
GPA and
welfare.
effort.
Yeah, all the DEIA crap. And my kid's 10 years old. So we're driving down this entryway into the school with all these banners. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. And so he's reading, we're kind of reading him. And then I go, yeah, but don't forget all conference GPAs and SATs. And the kid's 10 years old and he starts laughing out loud. He gets it. And I tell him, I said, these all sound good. That's really nice. But it's all about performance, man. You can be the wokest bastard on earth, but you've got to perform. And I said, and in about half an hour, you're going to really have to perform because the team you're playing, I don't care what they care about justice. Are they better than you? And you're going to find out in 60 minutes on a field, what really counts in this world. And then I'd said, if you don't think that way about performance and you're a parent, then the next time your kid brings home an F on a report card, you can congratulate him.
Yeah, right? Your team might be diverse, but that don't mean you're going to win.
Right. Life is about performance. It's not about how good you feel about yourself or virtue signal.
Yeah, that is an obstacle, I think, in parenting these days because it's just prevalent everywhere you look. It's just,
oh my gosh,
Billy, I know we didn't win. But I was listening to a podcast and they said that the league that their kids was in, they don't give trophies at all. At the end of the season, it's just there's no first, second, third. It's just I hope everybody had fun. That's it.
Oh fuck.
I can't understand that. What's the point of even playing?
That's what I mean about the meritocracy. That's another thing that's happened in this country, that there's this whole idea that meritocracy is not worth it. That we need to, kind of squeeze everyone to the middle so that everyone is the same. And it's wrong. But, my kids didn't grow up in that environment because they had me, and I would say that's a bunch of bullshit. You either win or you're sad and you figure out how you're going to win next time, or you go out and practice right now so you can win the next game. It's about winning. And yeah, you're going to lose a lot of times. And my kids did. There are plenty of teams that lost. I said, but it's about winning, because the minute you become accustomed to losing, you're going to lose your edge. And if you lose your edge, you're dead meat, I mean, this is tough stuff. Parents don't want to hear it. I don't care. I mean, at my age, I just say it. And I enrage people all the time, sometimes on these podcasts, but that's the way it works. I mean, if you want, I'm not into fairy tales. I'm too old.
Right on. You don't believe in that sort of thing. Unicorns aren't real. Dragons.
Yeah, man, they're not. Neither are rainbows.
All men may have been created equal, but they do not remain that way.
Yeah, if there was such a thing as equality, I always say to my kids, I said this when they were early. I said, when you have equality, boys, you don't have quality.
I read that. Yeah, that was great. I actually think I highlighted that because it's not about like being fair. It's about doing it right.
Right. I mean, there's a reason I'm not in the NBA, right? Okay. I wish I could have played in the NBA, but it didn't happen. But anyways, I think you'll love the rest of the book. I think you'll get you'll have those moments where you want to just say, what the hell is this bastard, dishing up to me?
At least I'll have this conversation to look back to.
Yeah, there you go. You'll know who you were talking to.
Yeah, I'm over halfway through, so I'll probably finish it tomorrow, and then think, oh man, why didn't I ask him this? Why didn't I ask him that? But that's how it always goes.
No big deal. Hey man, 6 months you can have me on again.
Awesome, sounds like a plan. We
Yeah,
do need
brother.
to give that a little bit of time to build back up. It's like an autobiography. You don't want to write another one right after the first one dropped.
Exactly.
Right on. Well,
Listen,
once
man,
again, hey,
thanks
thanks
again.
again.
You bet, man. It was a blast.
Right on. You have a good evening. Merry Christmas. And I will see you on social media.
All right, bro. Thanks, man.